Hi, my name is Dirk Gibson. I'm a professor of communication and journalism at the University of New Mexico, and I'd like to tell you about a book that I've written. 127 years ago, a series of letters was written and sent to law enforcement and newspapers and a variety of people in London, England. This correspondence was not happy correspondence. The subject dealt with murder and mutilation and torture and such. The author of the letters is literally unknown, although over time the name Jack the Ripper has been given to the sender of these letters. The Jack the Ripper crimes are perhaps the most famous crimes in the history of mankind. There have been more books written about the Jack the Ripper case than any other, and I've written one to add to the confusion. My book specifically is about the Jack the Ripper letters. The Jack the Ripper letters were a series of correspondence. I have 246 letters in my collection. And believe it or not, the purpose of these letters was socio-political. At the time of the Jack the Ripper crimes, Victorian England was a hotbed of ferment. There was a monarchy ruling the country, which did not care much about the poor, which was a large group in England, and as a result, there was open class warfare. For a while, it seemed as though the monarchy itself might not survive. And at its most basic form, the Jack the Ripper letters constitute a political polemic, a diatribe against the vested interests in the establishment in favor of the poor. I'd like to briefly share with you some of the major findings of my research in the Jack the Ripper correspondence, which you can find in the book. The first finding is of the approximately 250 letters sent under the name Jack the Ripper or pseudonyms, about half might be legitimate, might be from the actual killer, about half may not. The second finding I'd like to share with you is that there were three main aspects or characteristics of the Jack the Ripper letters. The first characteristic or factor was warnings of future crimes. There were relatively few murders in the Jack the Ripper crime spree. Some would say as few as 4, others would say 5, 6, or 7. I myself fancy the number 5. But the correspondence over the killings continued all throughout 1888, the year of the killings, 1889, and throughout the early part of the 1900s. So approximately half the letters may have been accurate, or from the killers, approximately half might not have been. The second major conclusion were the three main findings. There were three main aspects or considerations in the letters. The first was the warnings of future crimes. The second were attacks and criticism of the police. And the third and final was the use of the word boss, which wasn't in terms of a respectful boss-subordinate relationship. Rather, the term boss was a passive-aggressive, sarcastic way of saying someone who had an elevated spot in a hierarchy but perhaps did not deserve it. The third thing I'll share about my findings is that while there may have been more than one killer, and there definitely was more than one writer, we can find hands of 2 or 3 or 4 different writers in the Jack the Ripper correspondence. So there definitely was not one person behind this massive letter campaign. Let me conclude my time with you today by sharing a couple special features of my book. The first thing about my book that might be beneficial for you is that I use every single letter in the book. So every extant letter on Jack the Ripper is quoted in full in the book. A second factor is content analysis is provided. I discuss what was meant in the letters. I discuss the factors, the local historic factors, the contemporary social factors that were involved in these books. I look at three main aspects of people or of factors in the books or in the letters. I look for mentions of people. I look for mentions of activities, and particularly I look for mentions of verbs such as kill, work, and things like that, because Jack the Ripper referred to these crimes in his book or in his letters rather, as work and as his job. The final major reason you might want to use my book is that I have the largest collection of Jack the Ripper letters that's available. I have the collections from the United Kingdom Metropolitan Records Office. They have about 200 letters. I also have the letters from the Corporation of the City of London. They had about 10. And I've discovered about 15 letters myself in various newspapers, contemporary newspapers. So my book has the largest collection of Ripper letters. In conclusion, I'd just like to say that for those who are interested in true crime, in serial murder, or particularly in Jack the Ripper, this book might be a helpful collection to your Jack the Ripper information. Thanks for listening.